put a PowerPoint together for our 50th wedding anniversary, and we watched it by Zoom with family and friends on the 18th of June 2020, and we had a lot of fun, and I hope that this little movie will be something for our younger family to watch in the years to come. It amazes us really, 18th of June 2020 being 50 years married, and even longer since we've known each other, but how our family has grown. It's marvellous, and we're grateful to God for Sarah and Lee and Jack, and for Ruth and Stephen, John, Francis, Isaac and Lily, and we look forward to seeing their lives over the years to come. Cliff and Myra are Annette's parents, Nan and Pop, and when they married, Annette's mum was 18 years of age, 19 when Annette was born. So young, as you'll see in the next photo. Amazing. My mum and dad, Stephen and Joan, with my grandpa and grandma, and two of mum's sisters, with one brother and one sister missing, and that's taken in Lambasa in Fiji. My mum and me, and I think that's at Singatoka. I was born in Suva, but Dad had been posted to Singatoka. Actually, Dad was in England at the time I was born. Because of the war, he hadn't been able to go back from the time he had arrived in Fiji in 1938, and because his father was elderly and not well, he took a break there, finished his masters as well at Cambridge University, and came back to see me. Mum with her sister Claire, and later on we'll see Claire as a bridesmaid in our wedding. I was born in Fiji in 1946 and went to boarding school in England in 1955. At the end of the year came back to Australia and boarded with Auntie Betty and Uncle Bert and my cousin John. And then in 1957 went to boarding school at Shaw and remained there until 1957. I was fortunate I had three sets of parents in a sense. I had my mum and dad, and I had Mr. and Mrs. Lear and Mr. and Mrs. Cater, who adopted me for school holidays. I used to go home once a year. Annette looking super smart in her debutante ball gear. I can't remember the name of the guy who she went out with then. I included this photo simply because it was about the time of the previous photo. That was 65 and this is 66, and of course I had a bit of hair in those days. I thought I'd slip in a few slides of things that were pertinent in the 60s to Annette and my time, and so sit back and relax and enjoy these. Believe it or not, the words that you can see on the screen here are really quite important, and they come from a song called Barbara Ann by the Beach Boys. But in 1966, Mum and her family lived in Kirkoswell Avenue, Mossman, and I had a good friend, Norm Johnson, who lived in the same street. Mum and Norm knew each other, and in 1966, Norm had a party. And I was invited, Mum was invited, and needless to say, I saw this very attractive young lass, and somehow must have got the courage up to ask her if we could dance, and we did. And this song I can remember in particular stomping away to. The wash up of it all was that night I took Mum home. It wasn't very far to go, just around the corner, and nothing special. I just dropped Mum off and it was good night. And she told me sometime later she thought I was a bit forward, but anyway, I then got the courage up to ring her up to take her out again, and I took her to see Dr. Shivago. She was staying with Auntie Inu, and I picked her up that time, who was on Hopeton Avenue, just below Kirkoswell. And so those were the first two occasions that we went out, and there was a bit of a gap. I saw her every now and again, and then in some years later, I took Mum to see To Sir with Love after we'd been to a football match. And so anyway, that was the beginning of our 50 years plus. A lovely photo I took of Annette at Corona at Beauty Point in 1969. beautiful. Our engagement was announced in the Sydney Morning Herald. There was a photograph too, but it was absolutely dreadful, so I don't think we ever kept it. And it was a stunningly beautiful bride, arriving 20 minutes late because I think the photographer got carried away taking photos of her. Here she is again, Claire. Before we saw her with Annette nursing her, and now she's the little flower girl for our wedding. Pop's looking very serious, and I think Annette's looking up to heaven for help. The signing of the register, something quite funny happened there because Mr. Reverend Noel Delbridge asked Mrs. Marshall to come forward to sign, meaning Mum or Annette, and my mother stepped forward. We were married at St. Luke's Anglican Church in Mossman, and we returned there 40 years later for a service on a Sunday, but I must say it seemed pretty dead compared with our wedding day. Left to right is my sister Ethne, then Rosalind McIntosh, and then Claire and Cliff and Myra, Annette and me, my mum, and Ted Apted and Ned Cater. Ted was my best man, and Ned groomsman, and both of these being school friends from Shore days that we were in the same year and in the same boarding house. Our reception was held at Annette's mum and dad's home in Beauty Point. Just a lovely setting, a lovely night, a lot of fun indeed. And we got letters, well, Nan and Pop, Cliff and Mara got letters from numerous people writing to say what a wonderful time they had had. Ted was best man, and reading out a few telegrams there. It was a really lovely night. Ned Cater with Ethne. Jilly Marsh, who used to be one of a team we used to play squash with every week. Mum with her school friend Di McIntosh. They were in the same class and finished the same year. And Claire. Peter to the right, and that's Uncle Arthur, and it's mother's sister's husband. Our wedding dance music was Dr. Zhivago, and I always think this photo looks like Dr. Zhivago. That's Stuart Spring on the right-hand side. He was studying to become a doctor. In fact, he might have even been a doctor by then. The three sisters, that's Ina to the left, Norma in the middle, and Annette's mum Mara on the right-hand side. That's my mum to the left, and also in the photo are two sisters and friends, mostly from Fiji days. Norm Johnson and Tim Kirith up to no good with my car before we left our reception. When we decided to be engaged, I actually had made quite a lot of money on the stock market, but by the time of the wedding, I'd lost everything. And so our honeymoon was a very simple affair up the Hunter Valley, staying with friends and in motels here and there, but it was just a week. Anyway, it was a great time. We stayed with Don and Joyce Armstrong. Joyce was Johnny Lear, my great mate's sister, and They were up in Walker Way. It was pretty cold. And below is Ned, and that's Ned Cater, groomsman, and that was one of the vehicles I learnt to drive. I bought this unit in Wickham Road, Neutral Bay, before we were married, and it cost $17,100. I borrowed $17,000, and my car was on hire purchase. So, if your kids did that today, you'd well, I don't know what you'd do, but it was a lot of borrowed money. We were married on the 18th of June. We moved into our own unit in Neutral Bay, a lovely little 2-bedroom flat. But the stock market had collapsed, and I was looking around for a work, even though I had a job still with the broker, and I found one in Alice Springs. And so in November 1971, Annette and I drove to Adelaide and then caught the Ghan up to Alice Springs and began our adventure in the Northern Territory. Here I am as best man at my best man's wedding, so that's Andrea there on the left-hand side having a good laugh about something. So we were married in 1970, and it wasn't until 1977 that we had our first child, Sarah, and what a delight she was when she came into our life. And we love you very much, Sarah. Next in our family was Ruth, and she was a lovely surprise to us too, and born on Valentine's Day, a lovely time to be born. Ruth was born in Darwin on the 14th of February 1979, and this photo is taken on the 30th of March 1979 in Sydney when we attended Gilly Marsh's wedding. And I've included the photo because I thought Annette looked so young and sprightly. John was born on the 28th of March in Darwin, and he was 4 to 8 weeks premature. We don't really know how much, but he spent his time in the humidic crib in the early days and spent quite a bit of time in hospital, and we lived at the other end of Darwin basically, so Annette had to express milk and transport it to Royal Darwin Hospital, and it was all quite a procedure, and so we had no early photos of him as a baby, and this is my favourite from when we did get around to taking photos. This is Team Marshall many years ago, and in the ensuing slides we're going to see John and Frances married, Sarah and Lee married, Ruth and Stephen married, and our 40th and 45th wedding anniversary trips to Sydney, and it's all been a wonderful journey, and again we give thanks to God. A beautiful day weather-wise for John and Frances when they were married in down Caloundra on the water. Sarah and Lee were married in Burra in South Australia, and it was, well, I've got a note that was, I'm sure it was over 40 degrees, but I've got a note somewhere saying it was 39 degrees. It was very hot. Of course, you can't see that in the photos, but it was a lovely wedding, and we had a wonderful time. For our 40th wedding anniversary, I flew family into Sydney, and we rented apartments, and we had lunch on Fort Denison, right in the middle of Sydney Harbour. The next generation begins. Isaac James Marshall, who was born on the 9th of March 2011 in the Nambour General Hospital, and we've so enjoyed having John and Frances living on the Sunshine Coast and being a part of their lives. This is our 45th wedding anniversary, and this is on the steps of the Opera House. Family's grown a little bit, and again it was in Sydney. We all flew there and camped in Mossman and had the long weekend together. Grandchild number 2, Lily Grace Marshall, and we had a big surprise at her health when she was born, but in the grace of God, she is just such a lovely and bright and bubbly and very active little girl now. Jack Lee Wallace, born on the 2nd of June 2018 in Clare Hospital, and look at the hair. He just reminded me so much of Sarah when she was a baby. She had so much hair too. Ruth and Stephen Woodford were married in Bowral in the Southern Highlands of New South Wales. Another lovely wedding. A favourite photo of mine, and this is entering the reception at Berkelow's in, a little way up from Bowral. Stephen and Ruth stunned everyone who knew them because for the wedding dance, unbeknownst to us, they had been going to the Arthur Murray Dance Studios for 6 lessons, and they did a superb waltz, and then they did a really modern dance. It was fantastic. As I filmed them on my phone, I had tears coming down my eyes. Here we are, 50 years later, looking a little bit different, but thankful to God for our marriage and for our family and for the future.